Saul disobeys God. In our last story, we learned about Jonathan's bravery against the Philistines. Jonathan broke up the enemy's camp and sent them into a frenzy. Saul capitalized on Jonathan's bravery and sent his army in to defeat the Philistines. In this story, we will learn about Saul's disobedience towards God because of his desire to please the people instead of God, inspired by the book of 1 Samuel. Saul led Israel with a strong arm. Battle after battle, the armies of Israel defended themselves against enemy kingdoms. Nations that had once oppressed Israel now feared them, and Saul began to regain favor from the people. One day a word of the Lord came to Samuel. Samuel entered into the courts of Saul. This was the first time they had spoken since Saul unrightfully acted as priest over Israel before battle. Samuel could barely look at Saul anymore. His demeanor had slowly changed from humble servant to arrogant king. Nevertheless, Samuel had a message from God to share. "Saul, God has remembered the Amalekites and their crimes against them, and made life hard. Now it is your duty to rise up against them. However, you must leave none of them alive. None. No soldier, warrior, woman, animal, or riches." Saul wasted no time, for the Amalekites were a truly wicked people. Their evil had corrupted the land surrounding them, and their oppression knew no bounds. Saul was grateful for a chance to prove himself to God and to Samuel. His sword was heavy against the armies of the Amalekites. The armies of Israel prevailed swiftly and laid waste to the city. All that remained was their king, Agag, and the riches of their livestock. Saul considered killing Agag and burning his riches. Instead, Saul spared Agag to parade him in front of the people, and he took all the livestock, riches, and wealth of the city for himself. Saul brought the spoils of war back to himself and the people of Israel, and he sat on the wealth of a corrupt nation. As he returned to Israel, Saul made a monument for himself, a clear representation of his delusion of self-importance. Samuel was dwelling alone in the cool of his home when the Lord came to him and spoke, saying, "Saul has turned his back from me, and I regret ever making him king." Samuel cried to the Lord all night in anger, for Saul had been exactly what he warned the people of. Early the next day Samuel approached the throne room of Saul. Saul was elated to see Samuel, ignorant of his anger towards him. "Blessed are you, Samuel. Look, I have done as God commanded. The Amalekites are wiped away." "What are these sounds I hear of sheep and oxen?" Samuel interrupted. Samuel was old and frail, yet he spoke with a strength that demanded attention. "They are from the Amalekites. The people, they wanted me to spare them to make sacrifices unto God. In fact, Samuel interrupted again with his hand in the air. "Stop!" he yelled. Samuel knew Saul was lying. He had no intention of sacrificing anything to the Lord. "You are appointed king by God, and you were given a mission to consume the Amalekites. You were instructed to spare nothing and take nothing. So tell me, Saul, why did you not obey? Why did you pounce on the spoils and riches?" Saul smiled in fake ignorance. He laughed as though he did not see anything wrong with his actions. Standing up from his throne, Saul stepped down and put his hand on Samuel's shoulder and said, "Samuel, I have simply obeyed the voice of God. It is the people that wanted the spoils of war, not me. Yet I took the best of everything to sacrifice to God." Samuel brushed the king's hands off his shoulder. Saul was over 2 feet taller than Samuel, yet Samuel in this moment seemed to loom over him like a nightmare. Has God any delight in vain sacrifices when you have ignored his voice? Behold, Saul, it is far better to obey than to sacrifice. Rebellion is like witchcraft to him, and to presume you know better than him is worse than idolatry. Saul's eyes began to widen as he listened to Samuel. Samuel rose his arm and pointed to Saul. Because you have rejected God as your Lord, he has rejected you as king." As Samuel said this, he turned and stormed off. Saul chased after Samuel. "No, Samuel, no, I have sinned. I feared the people would turn against me." Saul begged him to stay. "Please, pardon my sin. Stay here and help me atone." Saul's fear of losing his throne caused a panic. He seized Samuel's robes and tugged back for him to stay. Samuel's robes began to tear. The sound of the tears echoed in the empty throne room. Samuel and Saul stood there looking at the torn garment. They were alone and completely silent for a few moments. Tears streamed down Saul's face. Samuel looked at the pathetic king in front of him. Though he cried, Samuel could see corruption in his heart. There was something disturbing dwelling inside him. "Just as you have torn my robe, so God has torn Israel away from you and given it to another." Saul wept on the floor. Samuel looked at him with compassion. He led Saul to the altar of God to pray. God would not change his mind, but he would not abandon Saul completely. After they had prayed, Samuel had Saul bring King Agag before him. Agag approached them with a smile on his face. Agag was under the impression that Saul would not harm him, but he had not yet met Samuel. Agag looked at the old man and laughed. He mocked him. Samuel looked at Agag and said, "You have led with corruption, greed, and wickedness. Your sword has made women childless. So shall your mother become childless." And in that instant, Samuel hacked off the head of Agag before Saul. Samuel wiped off the blade, handed it to Saul, and left. Saul would not see Samuel again, for death would soon take Samuel back to the Lord. Yet Samuel grieved over Saul. He grieved his heart and his mind. Yet Samuel would get to see another king anointed, a king with flaws, weaknesses, and failures. Yet he was a king that would pursue the heart of God, someone Israel could look on to as an example of bravery, repentance, and worship. A shepherd like Moses, a warrior like Joshua, and a priest like Samuel.